Welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Definitely.
Awesome.
Ah.
Today we're heading to the desert, the high desert of southern Peru,
Ooh.
to a place where, honestly, the earth kind of whispers secrets.
Okay.
Secrets that are thousands of years old. We're
Yeah.
talking about the Nazca Lines.
The Nazca Lines, yeah.
Have you heard of these?
Oh, yeah. I've heard of them. I'm fascinated by them.
So imagine like gigantic figures of animals and plants. Oh, and geometric shapes too.
No.
Etched right into the desert floor. Some are so large you can only see them from the air.
Really?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
You can't see them from standing there?
No, some of them, no. They're that big.
Wow.
So to guide us through this, we've got a couple of really interesting sources. We've got Nazca, Decoding the Riddle of the Lines by Brian Forster.
Okay.
And History's Greatest Mysteries, the Nazca Lines by the Charles River editors.
Oh, cool.
Who created these? I mean, what was their purpose? That's what we want to find out.
Right.
Yeah. It's the big question, right? It's a question that's puzzled people for decades.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like you were saying, some of the theories are pretty out there.
Right. Like, okay, for example, what about the idea that these lines were landing strips for ancient astronauts?
I mean, it sounds crazy, but
It's captivating, though. It really grabs you.
it does. That's what I was thinking. It's like, it's a fun idea.
Eric von Daniken, in his book Chariots of the Gods, that's where it kind of took off, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, is there actually any evidence to support it? Really?
I don't think so. Not really. I think it's important to kind of separate, the more fantastical theories, the really out there stuff from what actual scientific research is telling us.
Yeah, for sure. Got to be grounded.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into that. Let's talk about the science. The Charles River editors, their book talks about carbon dating, for example, and stylistic analysis.
Yeah.
Can you explain how those methods, how do those help us understand the Nazca Lines?
So carbon dating, it's really cool. Basically, it lets us figure out how old things are, like organic materials at archaeological sites.
Oh, okay.
So for the Nazca Lines, they've used it to date, like wooden stakes that they found next to some of the lines.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps us figure out like a time frame when they were made.
Got it.
Stylistic analysis, that's more about like comparing the designs of the lines to other things the Nazca culture made.
Like what kind of things?
Like pottery, textiles, things like that.
Oh, okay.
So by studying, how similar or different they are, researchers can kind of trace how the Nazca art and their whole culture changed over time.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what's the science actually telling us then? What have we learned?
Well, one of the most surprising things is that, the straight lines and the geometric shapes, they might actually be older than the animal figures that everyone knows.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So it kind of suggests that making these lines, it wasn't just like a one-time thing. It evolved over a long period. Maybe they had different purposes or meanings at different times,
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And it kind of goes against this idea that, the Nazca Lines were like this single unified project.
Right, exactly. It's more like, think of a tapestry, like a complex tapestry woven over generations.
Yeah.
Each thread adding to the overall picture.
Okay, I like that. And speaking of tapestry, Forster, in his book, he mentions this theory that the lines were actually like giant looms.
Oh, wow.
Used to weave textiles, which
Yeah.
the Nazca were really known for. Intricate textiles.
That's a really cool idea, but it's when you think about how big the lines are, some of them are miles long.
Yeah.
And the level of precision that you'd need to use them as looms, I mean, even though the Nazca people knew a lot about textiles, it's mind-boggling to think they could do that.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so if they're not looms and they're not for aliens, what were they used for?
Well, Forster also talks about this theory that they're a map of underground water sources, which would make sense in the desert.
Right. That's a really dry environment.
Yeah. The Charles River editors, they point out that it's one of the driest places on Earth. Rainfall is super scarce.
Wow.
The Nazca people were really good at managing water. They had these complex underground aqueducts and reservoirs to irrigate their crops and, just to survive, basically.
So it seems logical that water would have been really important to them.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Not just practically, but like for their beliefs and rituals too, right?
Yeah, a lot of researchers think that the lines were part of some kind of religious ceremonies, processions, maybe pilgrimages, designed to like please the gods and make sure they had enough water.
Like a giant outdoor temple.
Yeah.
Like dedicated to water.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And we know from other cultures in the Andes, like the Inca, Water was sacred to them. They had all sorts of rituals related to water.
So, okay, we've got these incredible lines etched into the desert,
Right.
and we've got this culture, the Nazca people. They were so dependent on water.
To survive, yeah.
It seems natural that the two are connected.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really interesting. We can start to put together a story that links the lines to how the Nazca people thought about water, their beliefs, their rituals, even just their whole existence in this really harsh environment.
Yeah, for sure. But before we go too far down that road, let's take a step back. Who were the Nazca people? How did their culture and society help to create these massive geoglyphs?
So from what we know from archaeology, the Nazca culture, they flourished in the valleys of southern Peru. This was between 200 BC and 600 AD.
Okay.
They were amazing farmers, artisans, engineers. You can tell that from their irrigation systems, their pottery. It was beautiful. And of course, the Nazca Lines themselves.
That's amazing. They did all of this. They created these things without any, like centralized power structure like a king or something.
That's what's so cool, right? It wasn't like they had one ruler telling everyone what to do. It seems like it was more egalitarian, more like everyone working together.
The Nazca book mentions that it was likely a communal effort.
Exactly.
Maybe different clans or groups within the Nazca society all working together to create these.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating. This communal aspect, it suggests that they all shared the same belief system.
A shared vision.
Yeah, a collective vision that drove them to create these massive works of art.
And those beliefs, like we were talking about before, they were probably tied to water. I mean, it was the lifeblood of their existence, especially in this dry landscape.
Right. It's like the lines themselves reflect their worldview,
Yeah.
like a way of connecting with the forces that kept them alive.
Physically and spiritually.
Yeah, exactly. That's a beautiful way to put it.
Thanks.
It brings us back to that core mystery.
Mm.
What did the Nazca believe? What stories did they tell about the world? How did those stories shape their relationship with the land, the sky, even life itself?
Those are some big questions.
Yeah. But before we try to answer them, let's dive a little deeper into the lines. What can we learn from the actual designs, the shapes, the figures that are etched into the desert floor?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the designs, they're like a treasure trove of information. They might hold the key to understanding the Nazca Lines, I think.
Okay, let's explore those treasures then.
Sounds good. It's amazing when you think about it, all those intricate designs, those massive geoglyphs, and they were created with such simple tools.
It's hard to believe, right? Like history's greatest mysteries, the Nazca Lines. That book explains it pretty well. It says they probably use like ropes and stakes, just to measure and outline the figures. And then they had to carefully remove all those dark rocks, the ones with that desert varnish, to expose the lighter sand underneath.
It really shows their ingenuity,
Yeah.
Their connection to the land, like a deep connection. They weren't just, putting designs on top of the earth. They were working with it, like revealing the beauty that was already there.
That's a good way to put it. So let's talk about some of the designs, the specific designs. We've got the hummingbird, for example.
Oh, well, yeah, the humming.
With its delicate wings, outstretched and that long beak pointing up at the sky. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then there's the monkey in that playful pose, almost whimsical, and that tail, a double spiral. It's mesmerizing.
Uh-huh.
And of course, you can't forget the condor.
The condor, yeah.
Enormous wingspan, like it's frozen in mid-flight.
Oh, and we can't leave out the spider.
Oh, yeah, the spider.
It's smaller than some of the others, but the detail, the level of detail is incredible.
It's amazing.
It's so intricate. And actually, some researchers, like Phyllis Pitluga, she's an astronomer, she thinks it might be an anamorphic representation of the Orion constellation.
Anamorphic representation, what does that mean?
Okay, so basically it means that when you look at it from the ground, the image is distorted. But if you see it from a specific angle or vantage point, it looks correctly proportioned.
Oh, I see.
So the idea is that the spider, you're supposed to view it from a specific spot, maybe like a nearby hilltop. And from there, it would align with the stars of Orion in the night sky.
Wow, that's amazing. If that's true, that means they had like a really advanced understanding of astronomy.
Right. More than we usually give ancient cultures credit for.
Yeah, exactly. Makes you think, like, maybe the Nazca Lines, or at least some of them, were meant to be some kind of astronomical calendar or observatory.
An observatory, that's interesting.
So they weren't just making art, just for the sake of making art. They were putting information about the stars, the seasons, maybe even like life and death cycles into these designs.
It's fascinating to think about. Anthony Aveni, he's an archaeoastronomer. He's studied the Nazca Lines a lot, and he's found alignments between some of the lines and the solstices and equinoxes.
Really?
Yeah, so it seems like they were definitely paying attention to the sun's movements throughout the year.
Wow. And Nazca. Decoding the riddle of the lines. It mentions that a lot of the lines converge at specific points.
Yeah, the convergence points.
Some of them connect to hills or mounds, and others just kind of stop in the middle of nowhere. Do you think those points could be significant?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. They definitely suggest there's more going on than just decoration. Aveni, he thinks those points were focal points for rituals, maybe related to water or fertility. He compares them to the Sikh system that the Inca used in Cusco.
The Sikh system, what's that?
Okay, so the Sikh system, it's basically like a bunch of lines, radial lines, coming out from the Temple of the Sun in Cusco. And they connect different sacred sites, called huacas, all throughout the Inca Empire.
Huancas.
Yeah, they're like natural features like springs, mountains, caves, things like that. And they were believed to be, where powerful spirits lived.
So if we apply that idea to the Nazca Lines, could those convergence points be like huacas and the lines themselves, like ceremonial pathways leading to them?
That's a very interesting theory, yeah. Imagine like processions of Nazca people walking along these lines, carrying offerings, performing rituals, maybe even acting out myths or stories related to their beliefs.
Like a giant pilgrimage across the desert floor.
Exactly. A way of connecting with the sacred power of the land.
Yeah. And it's important to remember, the Nazca people weren't the only ones in that area making these geoglyphs, right?
Right. The Paracas, they came before the Nazca. They also made these huge earthworks, like the candelabra of Paracas. That's a great example. You can only see it from the sea, though.
Yeah, that one's interesting. That massive trident shape, etched into the hillside overlooking the Pacific. Forster, he suggests it might have been a beacon for sailors, helping them navigate, maybe even representing the Southern Cross constellation.
It makes you wonder, was there some kind of shared belief system or practices that were passed down from the Paracas to the Nazca? Did the Nazca inherit some of their traditions?
It's like we're putting together a puzzle.
Yeah, a puzzle with a lot of pieces missing, though.
Right, exactly. Each geoglyph, each archaeological discovery, it's a piece of the puzzle, but we still have a long way to go.
But that's what makes it so fascinating, right?
Absolutely.
It challenges us to think differently, to look at things from new perspectives, and to be okay with not having all the answers.
And as we've seen, some of those perspectives can be pretty wild, like the alien landing strip theory.
Yeah, but even those crazy ideas, sometimes they can lead to something new, something we hadn't thought of before. Like that theory from Jim Woodman about the Nazca using hot air balloons. That's led some researchers to start investigating ancient ballooning technologies, like, could they actually have done that?
So even the more out there ideas can be valuable.
Yeah, exactly. I think the key is to be open-minded, but also to think critically. You have to be willing to consider different possibilities, but also to base your conclusions on actual evidence.
Speaking of evidence, let's get back to the water question and the Nazca people's relationship with it. You mentioned they were really skilled at managing water, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. The Nazca region, it's one of the driest places on Earth. So they developed this incredible system of underground aqueducts. They call them puquios.
Puquios, okay.
Yeah, and they use them to tap into water sources underground and then channel that water to their fields and settlements. They were amazing engineers. Some of those puquios went for miles underground.
Wow. That's incredible. So they weren't just artists and astronomers. They were also engineers, able to shape their environment to survive.
Exactly. And I think you can see that ingenuity, that understanding of nature reflected in the Nazca Lines themselves.
It's like the lines are a testament to their ability to not just survive, but to thrive in that really harsh environment. But there's still so much we don't know, right? Like, what did they actually believe about water? How did they see themselves fitting into this arid landscape? And how did all of that shape the creation of the Nazca Lines?
Those are the questions that keep researchers going, They're the big mysteries. But as we learn more about the archaeology, the culture, the environment that the Nazca lived in, I think we'll start to find some answers.
I can't wait to see where this all leads. This whole exploration is so fascinating.
Me too. It's amazing what we're learning.
It's amazing to think, we started talking about alien landing strips.
Right.
And now we're talking about ancient aqueducts and astronomy.
It's a wild ride, isn't it?
It really is. But I think it shows just how much the Nazca Lines capture our imaginations. There's so many different theories. It's incredible.
It's like they're holding up a mirror,
Yeah.
to our own curiosity, to our desire to understand the past.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And like we've said, some of those theories are more likely to be true than others. But even the really out there ideas, they can sometimes lead to interesting new
Oh,
discoveries.
yeah, for sure.
Like that suggestion about the Nazca people maybe using hot air balloons.
Mm.
That got people thinking about, ancient ballooning technologies. Like, could they have actually done that?
Yeah.
It's a good reminder, to be open-minded, but also to be critical, to consider all the possibilities, but always base your conclusions on evidence.
Absolutely.
Okay, speaking of evidence, let's talk about something that Forster mentions in his book, something really intriguing.
Okay, what's that?
He talks about elongated skulls, trophy skulls, that were found in some of the Nazca tombs. And these skulls, some of them even had red hair.
Red hair, wow.
Yeah, and they seem to have belonged to the Paracas culture, the people who came before the Nazca. It makes you wonder about the relationship between these two groups.
It does. It's like a little message from the past
Mm.
telling us that there's a whole story here, this complex relationship between cultures and traditions.
Do you think these skulls could have been like ritual objects?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe revered for their connection to ancestors or something?
It's definitely possible. And it adds a whole new dimension to our understanding of the Nazca people. It tells us they weren't isolated, they were part of a much larger cultural story, inheriting and adapting practices from those who came before them.
And that story, as you were saying earlier, might even go back further, connecting the Nazca to even older Andean traditions.
Exactly, like the concept of Pachamama, Mother Earth. She's a central figure in Andean cosmology, even today. And this deep connection to the land, the mountains, the rivers, the spirits that inhabit them, I think that might be a key to understanding why they created the Nazca Lines.
So it's not just about lines in the sand. It's about a whole way of life, a way of seeing the world that's deeply connected to nature.
Exactly. It's possible they saw the landscape itself as like a sacred canvas, a place to communicate with the gods, to honor their ancestors, to mark the passage of time.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? These vast geoglyphs etched into the desert floor, a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance, and this deep connection to something larger than themselves.
It's that connection, I think, that keeps drawing us back to the Nazca Lines. They make us ask questions about our own place in the world, our relationship with nature, all the mysteries that are still out there.
They're like an invitation, to look deeper, to go beyond the surface, to explore all the hidden meanings and connections that tie together the past, the present, and what it means to be human.
That's beautifully said.
Well, as we wrap up our deep dive into this incredible place, I'm feeling a sense of awe and also a desire to learn more. The Nazca Lines remind us that the past is never really gone. It's still here, woven into our present, waiting for us to rediscover it, to understand it in new ways, to reimagine it.
And maybe that's the most important lesson we can take away from all of this. The search for knowledge never ends. It's a constant back and forth between what we know and what we don't know. And the mysteries that fascinate us today, they might hold the answers to questions we haven't even thought of yet.
Well said. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep wondering.